So my a prime equals b over 2a. So that's how we'll tell them apart. And this a prime here is this a prime, and this a here is this a, and that a, and that a, and that a. Okay? So, just as before, I can replace this side with the equivalent form. So if this parentheses term is my a prime, then I can replace all this with x plus, if a prime is that squared, I can replace it with that, right? See what I did there? I've just replaced the equivalent, I've replaced this side with its equivalent form, where a prime is this. And that's supposed to be a 2 here. And then the right side still stays the same for now. Okay? Well, what is this? What is b squared over 2a? That is just b squared. I mean, what is b over 2a squared? That's just b squared over 4a squared, right? And I'll rewrite this side for completeness sake. Okay? Now, I want to get this in a form that's easy to work with. So what I'm going to do is multiply, I'm going to multiply this term by 4a over 4a. That's not a subtraction there. I'm going to use my finger to erase that. I'm going to put that in parentheses and replace the negative sign that was already there. So before we had negative c over a, we still have that. I've just multiplied through by 4a over 4a. Okay? Now the reason I did that is I want to manipulate this to get it in a form that will give me what I want. Well, if you look, we now have a common denominator on this side, right? 4a times a is the same thing as 4a squared. So both terms have 4a squared in the denominator. So I can use a common denominator and write it as one term, which is b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared, right? All I've done is taken advantage of the common denominator we now have. Well, if you look, everything on this side is constants. B is a constant, A is a constant, C is a constant, 4 is a constant. So I have gotten it to the point where I have this side of the equation, this term squared equals some constant. Well, just as before, we can take the square root of both sides. Well, what's the square root of this? That just leaves us with x plus b over 2a. The square root of this, I'm going to carefully put the square root sign over it. The square root of this is just the square root of what we already had, but we have the plus and minus just as before, remember? Anytime you take the square root, you get the plus and minus. So then all that's left to do is move this to the other side and write it with the plus and the minus, and that gives us our two roots. So the first root is going to be x equals, move it to the other side, negative b over 2a. When I say move it to the other side, if that doesn't make sense to you, just think in terms of I'm subtracting b over 2a from both sides. I've subtracted it here, I'm left with x, so I got to subtract it here. I'm first going to use the positive. Well, the square root of 4a squared is just 2a, so I'm not going to put the square root sign on the bottom, I'm just going to write 2a. On the top, I'm going to keep the square root sign and leave it as the b squared minus 4ac. So that's the first root right there. The second root is if I go with the negative sign, which is x equals, again I'm going to move the b over 2a squared over just like I have there, minus, again in the top I still have the square root, b squared minus 4ac, and then the bottom, again I have the 2a. So this is the second root. That's the first root, and that's the second root. Now, people write this in one form. You'll see this written in one form where they put this together. If you notice, this term and this term are identical. This term and this term are identical. The only difference that these two roots have together is that one has a plus here and one has a minus. So you'll see it written as 1, where I'll use this one just for example. You'll see it written. You'll see the quadratic formula written as this, plus or minus. You'll see the quadratic formula written as x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. What they mean by that is exactly what I've done here. It'll be plus here for the first root, minus here for the second root. And that is, when you see it written this way, where it's just written as once with the plus or minus, that is what people mean when they say the quadratic formula. And all of the a, b's, and c's here are the same as this a, b, and c. So if you're given a quadratic equation in this form, you can quickly use the quadratic formula that we've just derived to find the two roots, which the two roots would then be this and this. I'll stop there.